What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Wednesday, August 16th, 2023. As always, I am PK alongside my co-host, Phil. Phil, I have something to admit. I've apparently gotten into riding a bike a lot more than I ever thought I would.
Just in general, just riding around like the neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, I bought Brooke her and myself bikes. Obviously, it would be a bit weird if I just bought her a bike and just go, "Hey, go out by yourself." But for her birthday, because she's always wanted bikes, because we were down in Florida in February, I think it was, and we rode my parents' bikes down there, and we really liked it. And I'm not a big rollerblader anymore because that tires me out a bunch. So I said, let's get bikes. And I think it was Sunday. We rode our bikes from Gratwick Park, which is right on the river, all the way to Mississippi Muds and then back. And it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, because you got a nice prize halfway through. You ate and got some ice cream, and then rode all the way back.
Yeah, it's always the way back that's the issue. The way there,
it was in
never
the wind
never really too bad, and you're feeling good. The way there, you're like, this is great. And then, like anything pretty much in life, once you get halfway and you realize you got to turn around and go back, especially after eating the treat, you're like, oh, well, this is a bummer.
Yeah, I think we got maybe a quarter of a mile down. Like, we were still in the park and everything, but I looked down and I went, the bike lock is in the truck. So I had to turn around and pedal all the way back. And I realized on the way to the truck, we're going to be pedaling and riding back into the wind on the way home. And I went, this whole ride home is just going to be bad. But it was actually felt, which usually on trips and stuff like that, the ride back home always stinks. Like, you're done camping, you're coming home, you know you got to go work the next day. It always stinks. You're flying back home, you know that the long layovers and everything are going to hurt worse than the actual flying to the destination, because you got something to look forward to. It actually felt quicker to ride back than it did to ride there, and I don't know why, but it was weird. I think it was a total of like close to 8 miles we rode yesterday or Sunday.
Nice. It's not bad.
Getting back in shape, Phil. We got Tough Mudder coming up.
Yeah, in like a month. It's going to be brutal and awful.
Yep.
It's going to go terrible. It's going to go real bad.
Yeah, so if you want to stick with us, and we might only have another month of this show left, because both of the co-hosts might be out of commission for a while. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on Twitter at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com and look for the time breakdowns in the description of the show. Phil, for the first time in 2-3 months, we have an actual sports game to talk about. Now, the results meant nothing, but the Bills did have a preseason game versus the Colts, 1 o'clock on Saturday. They dodged all the rain and the storm, and it was Kids Day, and apparently everybody had a lot of fun, but a lot of people left at like the end of the first or second or something like that, because the stands were emptying out, because it looked like, I guess there was supposed to be another storm or something. Didn't actually happen. But Phil, my question is, what was the biggest takeaway from the game? Because obviously the results don't matter, the stats don't really matter, but the play on the field for certain players, I guess, which ones did you take the biggest note for?
Yeah, to me, the weird thing about preseason to me has always been, like, I look at the negatives more than the positives as things to really take away from. I know there's a lot of positives you can take things away from, at least maybe in the second half of the game when you had Barkley looking really, really good and the, backup wide receivers who are fighting for a spot looking really impressive. I take less from those positive plays than I do from players not playing well, because, I mean, at that point you're playing against, second, third string backups. Yeah, it's great they look good. You don't want to look bad in that situation, but how much can you really take away from, looking really strong in those situations? But for me, and what I really took away from the game, other than we're going to start off, Tyler Bass, 1 for 1, 40 yards out, killed it. The man is amazing, got paid, looking great. James Cook.
I was going to say, earn that contract extension with one kick.
Yeah, one kick. Boom. Preseason, done. Walked off like a champion. James Cook, I think it was still impressive to see him. Not really going to get too much into the running game or anything, but just watching the touchdown that he did score, the one cut, and just the speed he has out of that backfield where it looks like he's going up the middle, right off the handoff, he makes one cut to the left. No one can touch him. He's all the way to the end zone without being touched. It's just really impressive to see a running back like that for the Bills. I don't think we've really seen one like that in a while, where they just have that
McCoy.
one cut, really quick, explosive speed and ability to take one cut and make it a 15, 20-yard touchdown. So even though it's not really new, it was really good to see him just doing more of what he's doing. But more than anything, CB2 was kind of, one of the big things we were looking for in preseason. Dane Jackson comes out in his first series, has that interception. You don't see him the rest of the time. Elam struggling. Benford wasn't really thrown at all that much. I don't know. I mean, it's weird to see Dane Jackson. I know you're not the biggest Dane Jackson fan, and I think we both kind of agree that we like Elam and Benford's tool set better of what they can offer the Bills as far as just a difference maker compared to Trey White. But I don't know. It seems like Dane Jackson has every opportunity to already have CB2 locked up and possibly, sure, we'll see what they do against Pittsburgh, but we know the coaching staff likes him a lot. He goes out there, gets an interception, does nothing but, boost his own resume, and then he's gone the rest of the time, which is usually a sign that the coaching staff really has a lot of faith in him if he's, not getting the looks, not getting the competition that you would normally see given to some of those other players. So I don't know. To you, for someone who you and I both like Elam, we're hoping he does well. Is he worrying you from what we've seen in preseason and, even in camp when they said he's, been very hot and cold, had some good plays, some bad plays, and then the preseason game, you see a little bit more of that again, and just really hoping that he just kind of takes off and takes that first-round draft pick and pedigree and just, starts really putting it together. But so far, he's just not put it all together. Is he worrying you for his future? Do you think is it way too early to be, kind of saying it was a bad pick or anything? Or do you think he's just going to eventually, hopefully, figure it out?
So we're recording this 7:30 on Monday night. Right before this, I was on Talking Buffalo, which aired yesterday. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, it aired on Tuesday the 15th. So me and Pat Moran went into this quite a bit. I agree with you. It seems like Dane Jackson has the CB2 locked up because he came off the field when Jordan Poyer did, when Micah Hyde did, when Tre'Davious White did, when Matt Milano did, when all the other starters for the defense were coming off, Dane Jackson went off with them. So I think the CB2 is as locked up as it can be after one preseason game. I think it's his, and he didn't do anything to lose it, and nobody else behind him did anything to win it. And I think Benford has had a very good camp. It's been a bit up and down, but more positives than a guy like Kaiir Elam. Elam, he has moments where he shows why he was a first-round pick. And then there's other times where he just shows he's just lost on the field. And I said this on Talking Buffalo. I'm not ready to write him off and consider him a bust, but going into year two after the end of the season he had last year, where he was looking like the first round draft pick that the Buffalo Bills took for a reason to be playing opposite of Tre'Davious White, he just hasn't taken that role and ran with it and been consistent. It's too many up and down plays. He's too grabby out on the field. He's getting called for pass interference and holding plays, and if they watched him, they probably could have get called on every single play. But it's like the NFL where they're not going to throw a flag on every single play, so he does it all the time. But I'm not ready. Like I said, I'm not ready to write him off yet. But it is concerning, and it's another possible indictment on Brandon Beane, where it's another draft pick that just it doesn't seem like it's working out. I mean, Boogie Basham doesn't look like it's working out. AJ Epinesa doesn't look like it's working out. Kaiir Elam, again, going into season 2, so he's got a ways to go. But if the season started tomorrow, I think he's a healthy scratch going into Monday night versus the Jets. If the season started tomorrow, I don't think he is on the field. I think Benford gets it over him. I think Jackson and Tre'Davious White are the starters, and then you got Taron Johnson in the slot, backed up by Cam Lewis. I just don't see a spot for Kaiir Elam at the moment.
And yeah, it's definitely worrisome because exactly what you just said. I mean, it's another potential. I don't think I'm ready to write him off as a bust yet either. Right. I think it's too early in his career to be doing that. And I think, I don't know, do you remember him being raw out of college at all? Like, I mean, they talk about players like Josh Allen is obviously a huge example, but even Boogie Basham, I mean, coming out, I think actually Boogie was supposed to be a little bit more ready than most. But like, do you remember Elam coming out of the draft with them saying that he was, raw in any way and needed to develop? I thought he was supposed to be a pretty step on the field, ready to go kind of prospect, right?
I mean, he's coming into a different system. Florida played a different defensive system and a different defensive scheme than Buffalo does, so I know he's had to adjust to that. But when you're a first-round draft pick, it shouldn't take over a year to adjust. This is his second full off season. He's gone
Right.
through 2 OTAs. He had the rookie camp in his rookie year. Preseason games too. It's just I don't. It's just mind-boggling. Like it's Dane Jackson to me is like the Levi Wallace of past years, where
Oh, for sure.
they keep trying to replace him and he just keeps
Yep.
holding out of that role. It's just it's frustrating for a guy, again, like I said, the end of last season where I had such high hopes for him going into training camp and this year, and it's just he hasn't lived up to my expectations yet.
Yep. Agree.
But I think for me, my biggest takeaway from the game, besides Damar Hamlin taking the field for me and being on defense, and it just I think his first two plays were blitzing plays, and that kind of ties into what I'm going to talk about. But just seeing him, just that next step to not close the book on what happened, but nearing the final pages of overcoming everything from what happened last January. It's just unbelievable seeing him on the field. How many times did you have to hear that on the coverage? Was no hesitation in his game whatsoever and all that kind of stuff. But just seeing him back on the field was just unbelievable. But I felt Sean McDermott was true to what we heard some of the whispers were going to be going around, which was he was going to be much more aggressive. Phil, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember any times during the Leslie Frazier era and tenure that I saw that many blitz packages ever. Like, it was unbelievable how many blitzes Sean McDermott designed. Now, I don't think the defense was perfect at all. I think there were a lot of ways to improve, and you only gave up 2 touchdowns, and one of them, whatever. But I think if this is the type of defense you're going to be seeing moving forward, is more aggressive and more blitz packages, that could give up bigger plays more than we have seen in the Sean McDermott era so far. Because what's the biggest thing that we know about Sean McDermott is his defense does not give up big plays. I think with the defense that he's probably going into the season with being more aggressive and blitzing more often and seeing different packages and stuff like that, I think you're going to see bigger plays being given up. But I think that will also mean more turnovers and more sacks in the process, which puts the offense in tougher positions and possibly gives the ball back to your offense to do more damage and better field position. So there will be a give and take, but I think with the defense he has and the talent that he has back there, I think blitzing more often and sending some of those DBs like Jordan Poyer off the edge the one time, Damar Hamlin blitzed on his first 2 packages. You saw Matt Milano coming in for blitzes every once in a while. I think being more aggressive will pay off more in the playoffs as well when the defensive line just disappeared. I mean, to start the season last year, you were getting pressure with 4. Imagine what would happen if you sent that 5th extra guy. You could finish the sack and cause a turnover or whatever. It's going to help your DBs immensely. Also, putting them and not having to have them cover you for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds.
Yeah, I have 2 questions about that. I mean, first off, I agree. I don't think Frazier. I mean, I think they blitzed occasionally, but it was pretty rare. They usually just like to go with that front 4, which is why they've been trying to build them up for the last few years and haven't done the best job, but they're getting there. Hopefully this year will be another step forward for that front 4, but it wasn't very often that they blitzed. But the 2 questions I guess I have about that, I mean, one isn't a question, but just another observation. I mean, it was the first time in preseason that you've seen this new kind of defense, so I think it's going to take them a little while to put it all together as well. I mean, not blitzing all that much all that last year, and then all of a sudden coming into this year and trying it, in your first real game action. I think it's going to take a little bit for them to really get adjusted to it and used to it. But do you think without a true Tremaine Edmonds middle linebacker right now, nobody really stepping up very well into that role next to Milano, do you think that's going to play a factor / hurt these blitz packages? Like if you had someone like Edmonds to trust a little bit more in that middle linebacker spot. You could send more blitzes a little bit more confidently. Obviously, they're still going to, it looks like, but do you think it's almost a little bit of a knock on the defense not having, obviously it is in general, but do you think trying to change the defense to blitz a little bit more frequently, do you think not having that true secure second middle linebacker is going to be an issue for that kind of defensive switch?
I also said I guess I'm spoiling all the. Well, I guess I'm not spoiling.
I can bring up something else if you want.
I like Dorian Williams' play, but they got him set on playing outside linebacker behind Matt Milano. So you got Dodson, and then you had Bernard as your other middle linebacker options right now, and it's Dodson by default because Bernard got hurt. I don't. It's tough to tell after one game how much that middle linebacker is going to play a role in the defense right now, because I think you're going to see a lot of Taylor Rapp. I think you're going to see a lot of Damar Hamlin. I think you're going to see a lot of those safeties come down into the box, and you might not see a quote-unquote middle linebacker on the field as much. So I think Sean McDermott has always been more of an aggressive head coach, so I don't think the lack of a star-powered middle linebacker is going to affect that much, but I do see your point on, I guess, is it more of a risk sending that many players and having to rely on an unproven middle linebacker to kind of cover for those people that are blitzing?
I mean, I forgot what game it was. It might have been Kansas City a few times, but in the past we've seen those just one miss in the secondary, right, that one missed tackle, and all of a sudden that player's gone for a touchdown. So if that's the situation here where you're going to start blitzing more and you have that middle linebacker to make that adjustment, make that last guy out there, make that tackle. If he misses, you're in trouble. It'll be interesting to see what that kind of looks like. But with blitzing more and teams, I mean, KC's a different animal, so I'll try to just work off of them. But also just all the top teams in the AFC. You got your Chargers, your KC, a few other teams out there. Who do you like? Do you think these blitzing packages will work in the advantage? I mean, again, KC's a very hard example because Mahomes is incredible at working on the fly and improvising, as is, a player like Lamar Jackson. Like, I feel like a blitz isn't going to be all that effective against teams like that where KC's the number one team you're trying to take down right now, and I don't know if blitzing is really what's going to work against a player like Mahomes because he is so good at just adjusting on the fly, but maybe that added pressure is all it really needs to get them to that secondary level and maybe take down a team like KC. But, like, how do you see the blitzing affecting top teams in the AFC like KC?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very selective when he chooses to call it. I think you're going to see it a lot more often than in the past, but I do agree. I mean, versus Mahomes, a lot of times he just gets the ball out so quick where the blitz isn't going to really matter, but you do have to make him uncomfortable. Some of his worst games, like that Cincinnati game a couple of years ago where Cincinnati beat him and went to the Super Bowl, they were making him uncomfortable back there because they were getting pressure on him. Yes, that was only sending 4 occasionally, but I think the biggest thing that I've been missing and not even forgot to talk about but didn't mention it, but when Von Miller does come back and you got that three-headed monster of Floyd, Miller, and Rousseau blitzing, you might be able to get that amount of pressure once again by just sending 4 and then maybe even a delayed blitz where you can get pressure to Mahomes, but you have that 5th blitzer in there to clean up when he rolls out of the pocket. So I do think and again, this goes beyond my expertise and my knowledge of blitzing packages, but I think if you're more aggressive like that, it could shake Mahomes a bit more if you can actually get the pressure to him. I think that's been the biggest issue is you just haven't been able to get to him quick enough. Again, he can get the ball out very quickly, but if you not having Tyreek Hill, I think will eventually come back to haunt him. It didn't really last year, and they went on to win the Super Bowl. But not having that security blanket of a guy that can grab it 2 yards and take it off 90 will hurt him. But I do agree where there will be times where, with anything in football, the opponents are going to adjust your blitzing packages. So I don't think he's going to overuse it, but I think there's going to be more select times and more games where they're going to go in and be more aggressive than they would have been in years past.
Yeah, kind of to your point at the end there, which is what I was going to say, but you're kind of getting to it, is I wonder if it's just the threat of blitzing. Like, do it every once in a while just to
Right.
show that we can blitz and will blitz every once in a while. You just really add another element to the defense that hasn't been there for the last few years, just to kind of show different looks. And a lot of times they do fake blitzes where, it looks like it, then they drop everyone out. So I wonder if it's simply just adding that element to mix it up and give that offense another look and something else that they have to kind of be aware of and prepare for if you're going to start blitzing every once in a while, and then, obviously drop it off other times. So I do like it. I do think it'll be another added element to the defense, but very interesting, like you said, just to see how quickly McDermott is already trying to kind of change things up a little bit now that he's taken over.
Yeah, and I didn't think he missed a beat on making any play calls, but it will be interesting to see how the season progresses and where it's critical times where you actually have to make tough decisions. Do you go for it here or do you rely on defense? So it's going to be a season-long watch. But, Phil, that's kind of the Bills are playing their second preseason game Saturday, and this is where it ties in during the guillotine football draft that I run that I've yet to make it past week 6. But, Phil, that ties into our Fantasy Blitz segment. We'll talk about the next Bills preseason game on the next Wednesday show, go over all the goods and the bads of that game. But we went over the sleepers in the draft. We went over the bust. We have 2 drafts this coming up weekend. I guess the next bit for this Fantasy Blitz is, what is the best advice you can give to those that are drafting either this weekend, next weekend, or whenever before the season starts?
Yeah, I think mine and yours are similar enough, and I think it's just the biggest advice you can really give in going into a draft. I'm going to make mine different enough from yours that it's, they're 2 separate things, but mine is going to be position-based. Don't go into a draft thinking, I have to get one of the top 3 QBs. I have to get the top tight end, the top 2 tight ends. I have to get, a top 10 running back. Whatever falls to you in the draft is what you want to end up taking. Don't reach for players based on position just because you absolutely have to have one of those top guys. Get that mindset out of your mind immediately. And, even if you see Travis Kelce there at 6 overall, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, up there in the second round. You're like, oh, those guys look amazing. They finish really well every single year. Don't reach to go get one of those elite players. Let the draft fall to you, because let other people reach for those players and then let that player that they're passing up end up going to you, and you still get an incredible player but at a much better value. So the biggest thing is just letting positions kind of fall to you. Don't reach unless you really want that player. But for the most part, try not to reach for different positions just based on where they're falling, or if you panic and think, there's no way this guy's going to come to me next time around, let me draft him super early because I really want him. Try to get out of that mentality and just say, okay, I can pass on that guy because I can get, this RB1 instead of this wide receiver 6 just because I really want this other wide receiver or this other running back or a tight end or a QB. Just let the draft fall to you a little bit more, and don't get locked into thinking you have to go, start your draft running back, wide receiver, whatever it is. Don't get positionally locked into a draft.
Yeah, I think that perfectly ties into my advice also is we are victims of this, and we are definitely culprits of this. Don't get too into mocking and rankings when drafting. I mean, you want to make sure that you know where players are falling in the draft. You want to be prepared in that one. But you also want to make sure that when you are mocking, like in our one main league, we have 2 keepers, but we draft and we use ESPN. ESPN doesn't allow you to mock draft, which putting in keepers, which stinks. I hate ESPN, but we use Sleeper for that because Sleeper allows you to kind of maneuver the mock drafts however you want. But Sleeper has different rankings than ESPN, than Yahoo, than Underdog. There's rankings all over the place. So you just want to make sure that when you are going into your draft, you actually know, because like for Stevenson, for example, he's much higher on Sleeper than he is with ESPN. ESPN, he's down in like the 40s, I think it is. Sleeper is way up there. So just going in, you also don't want to make sure, because I fell victim to this a couple of years ago. When you're mocking, I went in wanting a certain player, and when it came time to the actual draft time, he was gone. And then it was my turn on the clock, and I was panicking because in every single mock I did, this player fell to me. mocks and your home leagues are not the same. You're going to run into things that just don't happen. They're mocks for a reason. They're to practice, so you kind of know who's around your pick. Don't fall too attached to one player. My last thing is stick to your rankings, and I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying as well. If a better player in your draft is falling according to their ADP, don't just pick him because the ADP is higher than the player that you have ranked. Stick to your rankings. Like, if you rank this person higher than the person that's technically ranked higher on ESPN ADP, take the player that you ranked personally higher. Stick to your rankings because you work so hard in the offseason and the draft lead up. Don't let a player that might have been too high in the ADP fall and you go, he was ranked 16. I'm in ADP. I'm drafting here at 24. This guy's still there, but the guy I had higher who is still sitting there. Don't fall into that trap. Make sure that you're drafting based on your own rankings, not based on the mock and ADP rankings.
Yeah, I've done that a few times in drafts
Me too.
Recently where a player will drop not even just a few
Kyle
spots.
Pitts?
It'll be like, right, Kyle Pitts was a huge one. Juju, I think I got maybe 2 years ago when he wasn't on KC and he was falling. I think he was still on Pittsburgh and he was injured and he was just falling a ton. I was like, all right, he's a good player, just happens to be injured. That's why he's falling. He fell like 30 compared to his ranking. And I was like, all right, he's still here. I'll just take him, whatever. And he ended up doing absolutely nothing that season. Kyle Pitts last year took him because he was falling. I was like, all right, he's still available. He's supposed to be one of the best tight ends this year. I got to take him. I really like having a good tight end, and he was just terrible. So, yeah, I've definitely fallen victim to that a lot recently, and going to try to shake that this year, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, anything that you all out there have done or are doing, we have done many, many times, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't start mocking in, like, March. It doesn't help
never
that
do
much.
that. Rankings change so much. Maybe save mocking until like 2 or 3 weeks out. You can do it every once in a while, but don't do it as bad as me and Phil did. I mean, I had spreadsheet on spreadsheet from March until the draft, and it changes so much. It's unbelievable. It's what you do in March doesn't really matter when it comes time to August. But Phil, that was Fantasy Blitz, and good luck this weekend in our 2 drafts, because in the one on Saturday we are drafting back to back, and then on the one on Sunday we have one person in between us.
And I dislike my keepers in the one, and the other one's 18 teams, so that'll be just brutal because it's 18 teams. So it's going to be an interesting weekend.
It's going to be a fun weekend. We've been waiting a full year to draft again. But, Phil, we'll move on to our final segment here, the Buffalo Bandits. Phil, are you sitting down?
I am. As the
stand up, Matt.
Vince
is back. Not just for 1 year, Phil. The man between the pipes, the greatest goaltender of all time, one of the greatest NLL players, one of the best lacrosse players of all time, is back on a 2-year deal, baby. Unbelievable. After, 2 straight seasons of signing 1-year deals, he's back on a 2-year deal. So Steve Dietrich did not get him to the 3-year deal that he wanted after the San Diego matchup that I read the story about. But he did get him for 2 more years. And to me, that's even bigger than him coming back, which I thought was 50-50. And the last thing here, Phil, and then I'll let you speak. Thank God it's over. You can tell on video, I don't have a very good hairline already. The last 2 summers have been even worse. So the best thing I can think of moving forward, even past this season, is we do not have to go through this again next year. I guess the only thing we really have to worry about is he for sure coming back? That's the biggest thing. Like, he's signed, but will he retire? So I guess we still got a tiny bit of it, but it's less so on a 2-year deal.
Yeah, I was also kind of, I don't know, it's that, false hope, or you don't want to quite believe it until you see it. So I agree with that as well. Very exciting. He's at least back for 1 year, and I understand he signed a 2-year, but he can retire at any time as well. So still, I'm definitely going to be nervous next summer, most of this summer, to make sure he's truly coming back. But at least for this year, incredible to have him coming back. I mean, pretty much everybody we were hoping would come back came back. Ethan O'Connor They lost him in free agency, and honestly, I think it's good for him. I think he was a little bit buried on this team, but I really like Ethan O'Connor. I think he's a great player. I think he's going to do really well on a younger Rochester team. I think he's going to get some more playing time. So for him himself, I'm really happy for the player, and I think he's always been just a huge part of Buffalo and just a really great personality and really great guy around the locker room and everything. So really happy for the player to go get some more playing time and maybe be just a little bit bigger part of Rochester. I hate that it's Rochester because I don't want to have to not want to cheer for him, but really happy for Ethan O'Connor. And then Matt Vince, like you said, just huge. I mean, having him back is massive. I know we kind of talked about what would the Bandits end up doing. We posted it on Facebook, what other people's ideas were based on our thoughts, and nobody really liked our ideas because nobody wants anything else except Matt Vince, or apparently still Dylan Ward, but I mean, he wasn't going to ever come here. So it was pretty much Matt Vince or bust in a way. I think Kyle Shanahan would have been a fine go-to option.
Delvin Shanahan.
Delvin, sorry, as the backup, but Matt Vince is Matt Vince, and he's incredible. I think it was Josh Byrne who posted on Instagram, like, the entire league is upset right now that Vince is back for 2 more years, and he's right, because nobody wants to go against Matt Vince. Kyle Buchanan, back for 1 year. Brandon Robinson back for 1 year. The offense pretty much completely back again. Really excited to see Buchanan back. I mean, honestly, one of the bigger things with Buchanan is not only that he's back for the Bandits, but he's not going to a different team. I didn't like the idea of him. There was a article, was it Aya Lindor, that was just kind of throwing it out there?
It was either them or I think it might have been Teddy Jenner and Pat Gregoire of the NLL.
Okay, that they were just kind of floating free agency ideas out there, and they kind of had the thought of Kyle Buchanan going to Toronto, and you and I both really didn't like that idea whatsoever. So really happy to see him back in a Bandits uniform. I mean, I love the player, love what he brings to Buffalo. I think he can still be a huge contributor as he showed last year, and I think he's just going to really help the team again, but also really good to see him not going anywhere else. And then Robinson, I'm excited to see what this offense looks like with Robinson actually involved and everybody healthy. I don't know what this team's going to look like if everybody is healthy. There are one too many players on the team at this point, with everybody being healthy, as far as, who's going to play on offense and defense and where people can actually play. But Robinson was making a really solid impact on offense when he was healthy, and we just haven't really seen him with everybody else all at the same time, all healthy. So I think this team's, oddly, even though they're bringing pretty much everybody back, going to look a little bit different, because we just haven't seen this entire team and roster healthy at the same time, all of last year. So it'll be interesting to see what this team truly looks like going into this season if everybody is healthy headed into the year.
Yeah, so really the only true UFAs or RFAs left out there is Greg Harnett, who was on the holdout list all year long, and you were excited when they signed him and kind of excited to see what he brought to the team, but he is a UFA. And then Doug Buchan, who is also on the holdout list, who was the backup behind Matt Vince prior 2 seasons, not last year, but the prior 2 seasons after that. He is also an RFA. So those are the 2 left outstanding in those 2 departments, but that's just a lot of house cleaning. But yeah, getting Matt Vince back on another 2-year deal, it not only, because if he would have retired, I think you're still a playoff team, but I don't think you're a title contender. Bringing Matt Vince back and convince Vince, that was the whole hashtag this whole summer, trying to convince Vince to come back. Your title window is right back there. Your title defense is right back there. But then you added Kyle Buchanan back. You didn't let him go to a rival team. Brandon Robinson, who I tweeted out and said, I loved his game, but I wonder where he stands in the lineup that's fully healthy. So, like you said, bringing everybody back besides Ethan O'Connor, who does go to Rochester for a 2-year deal, who I really think he's going to do wonders for that young team over there. It stinks, but I think bringing that championship pedigree over to Rochester is going to do wonders over there, even though that kind of hurts the Buffalo Bandits a bit. But bringing back the whole forward group, bringing back the majority of the defensive group, you're pretty much just running it back, and why wouldn't you? Because you're the top team in the league last year. But it went from okay, what does this team possibly look like? Like we had that whole segment, like you were talking about. We got the fan interaction, all that kind of stuff about what happens if Matt Vince does decide to retire, which he's earned the right to do. He's had an unbelievable career, but thank God he's back for 2 more years. But what do you do if he's gone? And we all went like this goes from a title team to a team that will make the playoffs and can make some noise, but I don't think they're a playoff team or a championship team. Now that he's back for 2 years, your window is wide open once again to defend the title. Again, I absolutely love that. It's going to make covering the team that much more interesting. But again, the pressure after winning, they got the monkeys off their back after winning one. Now comes what's even possibly more difficult is repeating. But they have the guns to do it. Like you said, it'll be interesting to see how the lineup looks when everybody's healthy. Hopefully going into the season, everybody's healthy. I know Josh Byrne has got some nagging injuries in the PLL, but he's got some time to get back. The season doesn't even start till the beginning of December. But as long as everybody's healthy, there's too many bodies on this team, and they still have draft picks left to sign. So, and more draft coming up in September 15th, I think it is. But, Phil, this is a very crowded team. Sounds just play our episode from last year. There's too many bodies and not enough room.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit more as it gets closer to the draft rather than right now. We're just focused on Matt Vince coming back and the whole team. But, yeah, I don't know. And, again, we've talked about it a little bit before. That's tough in the NLL in general. There's not a ton of teams, and there's a lot of talent out there being drafted every single year. I mean, unlike other leagues where the talent is spread out amongst more teams, you start getting into the fourth, fifth, sixth round, and the talent diminishes pretty quickly. Whereas the NLL, I feel like the top 5, 6 rounds are still really good because there's only a handful of teams and there's a ton of players trying to get in every single year. I mean, like you mentioned,
and nobody retires.
Right, everybody stays in there. Everybody stays pretty good for a really long time. And I mean, we've mentioned that in the NLL, it seems like, your prime of your career is from 30 to 34 to 35 to 36. I mean, these guys just hang around forever, and rightfully so. They keep doing an incredible job. So it's just tougher for younger players to get in. But like you said, the Bandits have, draft picks from last year that aren't on this team yet, and yet they're going to draft even more. So what do you end up doing with all of that? But we'll talk about that when it gets a little bit closer to the draft.
So just a couple more before we get to that summer update that we teased last week, and then we kind of just ran out of time, so we pushed to this, which actually makes out better because there was more playoff numbers that I could add to the stat sheet. But we'll start out west first is Kevin Crowley. We called it on this podcast that we did not think he was going to go back in San Diego. It didn't work out. The trial on a one-year basis didn't really work out. I think his numbers suffered a bit with the crowded forward group there. So he goes from San Diego, and this has been a common theme all offseason long. He goes to Vancouver, and Vancouver's just pulling everybody. They also pulled John Lintz from Colorado to go to Vancouver. Vancouver, again, I don't know how good they're going to be, but they're going to be vastly improved from last year, and they're bringing in these veteran guys, so they're not going to have to rely on the young group that they're also bringing in. I think that's going to be a nice transition from the older guys, the Matt Beers, who else went out there, Phil? The other defender that I can't remember his name. I'll look it up while I'm talking here, but the only other one is Kyle Rubish. He stays in San Diego after the trade where his rights went to San Diego. He stays there on a one-year deal.
Yeah, that one hurt the most more than anything. I really wanted him to.
I know. I took a moment of silence for you.
Yeah, to go back east and to go to Buffalo. I don't think Buffalo necessarily needs a player like that, but at the same time, he's just an incredible player. And if he
Ryan
was
Dilks was the defender for Vancouver
yes.
also.
If he was looking for a solid way to win a championship and he was headed back east, I would have loved for him to be here. But if he's going to go anywhere, I'm happy that he is staying out west. Staying in San Diego from that trade, I don't love that him and his, that he's going to San Diego or staying with San Diego in a way. But I think San Diego is going to be a team that is scary. Again, they already were last year. Now they've added a solid defenseman. And that was something that they were missing a little bit of last year, was just the defense needed to be shored up a little bit. And they are Baptiste. They're getting scary. They're definitely adding pieces in the offseason to make themselves positioned really well for another deep playoff run or their first deep playoff run, because they keep getting bounced in the first round. But they have a lot of talent on that team. And then, like you said, Vancouver, I think Vancouver is going to be kind of a watch and see the entire year to see how they kind of put it all together with all this talent that they're pulling. But like you mentioned, they're veterans, so they're trying to be in a win now mode to couple with their younger players. So we'll see how it kind of all gels together and see if they actually are a scary team out west or if they kind of fizzle a little bit. But I think that's going to be kind of a season-long watch. I don't know if you're really going to get an idea of who they are until toward the end of the year.
So we'll move on to the teams that kind of have more of a factor on the Buffalo Bandits. And New York, they're making moves. I know I criticized what Philly did last episode when we talked about that massive three-way trade and how I actually liked what New York was doing, and I still do. Damon Edwards, he was a player that when we were talking about the UFAs on this podcast a couple weeks ago, I said that New York could not afford to lose, and they bring him back, and then they also bring in from Calgary Mitch Wild, and I know he has kind of possibly taken more of a step back. I think he's on the tail end of his career, but he signed for 3 years in New York. I absolutely love what New York is doing on the back end to kind of reinforce the offensive skill that's led by Jeff Teat out there.
Yeah, I'm surprised they're still pulling some of these older. Again, we just talked about older is a weird thing to say for the NLL. I feel like in football and maybe hockey, like once you hit 30/31, 32, you're starting to fade off and you're hitting the tail end of your career pretty quickly. Whereas in the NLL, I feel like 30 to 34, you're still pretty much in your prime. So Mitch Wild coming in 32 on a 3-year deal. I just want to say that he, like you said, he's starting to get toward his tail end. You absolutely have to have veterans mixed with your young guys. I mean, it just is how sports kind of work. You can't have a full team of young players. They tried it last year, and look what happened with them. Even though you wanted them to go to playoffs, they did not make it. So I like what they're doing, bringing some of these guys back. And like you said, the assistant captain, Damon Edwards, you had to bring back. They did. Mitch Wild, a little bit surprising to me, but I don't dislike the move. I think he's another player that has been around plenty, still has something in the tank, and then also can kind of be a good leader for the younger players on that team.
Yeah, but I mean, Kevin Brownell last year, they bring in JT Giles Harris from the PLL. I don't think he's played in the NLL yet. They brought in John LaFontaine, the Kyle Matisse trade. Then you add in a guy like Mitch Wild and bringing back Damon Edwards. The team's got some defensive talent, and if Dunkerley or one of the Oralmans can actually provide any type of goaltending back there, the team could have a solid team. I am not calling for them to make playoffs. It's too early for that. I'm not going to make the mistake again. But there is some legit talent in New York now, and they could be a team on the rise, which it's not a strong statement because you can really only go up. But I'm very impressed with New York's offseason so far.
I guess they absolutely needed to shore up that back end, so I completely agree with what you're saying. The deals they're making, I'm just surprised they haven't. And again, they have a lot of young offensive talent, so it might just be taking a couple of years to get there. I'm surprised they didn't go out and try to get Teat some kind of offensive support so it's not running solely through him and pretty much him alone. I know, again, some of those guys might take that next step, and then, you're looking at players. You didn't need to get anyone else on offense. I'm surprised they didn't try to bring in, and maybe they did. We don't know. I'm not trying to say they didn't try to bring in anyone in, but I'm surprised they weren't able to, so far, bring anyone in on offense to kind of just support Teat a little bit more on that other side or in general.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Maybe they did try, and maybe the Teat name just isn't big enough yet.
Yeah. Yep.
But we'll move over to the summer update. On the next show, we'll update if there's any other big moves. But Buffalo's got a couple more guys that they need to lock up to new deals, but they're guys that aren't really going to go anywhere because they haven't reached the threshold for an RFA status or UFA status yet. But those players are locked into Buffalo. They just need new deals, and we'll talk about that when they get down. But all the players that needed new deals got them done. And really, they only lost Ethan O'Connor, and after a championship like that, a lot of times in other sports you lose a lot of players because they kind of price out, but that's not the NLL yet. We'll move over to the summer update here. The WLA, the playoffs are currently going on right now, and we kind of just wanted to touch on some players that were and are playing summer ball elsewhere, because we said we were going to do this, and we kind of want to keep track of how some of the Buffalo Bandits players are actually doing. Nate Kuznetsnikov is playing for the Thunder, and in 12 games in the regular season, he had 12 goals, 17 assists, 29 points. In the playoffs, they're still playing right now, I believe. 3 games played. He's got a goal, 4 assists, 5 points. Now he plays for the Langley Thunder, who went 14-4. Phil, I just want to, if you're underwhelmed by some of the numbers he put up, this is who he's competing with. Connor Robinson, Curtis Dixon, Robert Church, Holden Gallant, Bobby Kidd, Dane Doby, Frank Ciliano, and then the coach is Kurt Malowski. That team's just stacked. Just unbelievably stacked. The other players that are playing in the WLA, and then I'll have you talk about it because I want to go over all the WLA first. Brad McCulley is playing for the Victoria Shamrocks as well as Steve Priolo. Brad McCulley, 5 regular season games played, 7 goals, 3 assists, 10 points. In the playoffs, he played in 3 games, 2-2-4, and then Priolo, 10 games in the regular season, 3-4-7. In the playoffs, he had 2 assists in 3 games. Victoria Shamrocks, they went 10-7-1 in the regular season. They have Marshall King, Patrick Dobbs, Thomas Vason, Chris Wardell, Jacob Bruce, and Cam Dunkerley. And then the last one here with the WLA, Delvin Shanahan plays for the Nanamo Timbermen. They went 12-6. He played in 8 games, went 8-3 with a 9.5 or 1.5 goals against and an 8.19 save percentage. In the playoffs, they did just get bounced. I think he had a 40 save performance in that one. He played in 4 games, 1-2, 9 goals against, 8.16 save percentage. He plays with the MVP of the league, I believe it was, Zach Manns, Brett McIntyre, and Clark as well.
And Shanahan, I believe, when we first updated this originally, that first game play, didn't he have a really bad playoff game to start?
He did. I think it was like 16 goals against and like a 6.29 save percentage.
Brutal.
Like
so for him to come back really tighten those stats up is absolutely incredible to see. To go, I mean, especially because you don't have a full season to kind of right that ship. You have just a handful, 2 other games to try to get those numbers back under control, and he was able to. So really good to see. Again, I think he would have been the way to go for the Bandits if Vince would have retired. I think Shanahan is looking like everything we've seen. He looks like he is ready to step into that role whenever that role is available. I do worry a little bit that with some of these numbers that the Bandits at some point might lose him, but I think there's a lot of really good young talented goalies around the league, so I don't know exactly right now where else he would fit in, because I mean, if you go anywhere near, I don't know, I guess Albany would be pretty close. I don't think they have a great goaltending out there, so I mean, he's got some local options if he wants to stay in the area. I think that's the only thing that worries me about him, especially with Vince getting 2 years, is that, I mean, with these kind of summer numbers he's putting up, those are absolutely solid stats for especially a NLL backup. So I do wonder at some point if he'll get the itch to move on. But right now, while he's the backup and enjoying life as a championship backup, and I think he really likes the Bandits, likes being around the team, and I don't know how you wouldn't love being around Matt Vince. So hopefully for a while he is as content can be, and when Vince is ready to hang it up, he is still on the team and ready to take over. I think they're grooming him very, very well to be the next one in line for the Bandits. And I obviously Vince is impossible to replace, but I'm not terrified of Shanahan stepping in. I think he's going to be a pretty solid goalie, and he's still quite young, so still learning quite a bit as well. But Nate Kuznetsnikov, I think it's great to see that he was on a team with all of those players and Coach Kurt Malowski. I think that's something that's just great to be around. Like a player like him, he's still learning the NLL, has only had a few games under his belt. He's been injured for a long time, put up pretty good numbers, 29 points in just 12 games. That looks fine to me. And I think just being on a team with those players, being around those players, being around that coach, I think that's just a really great summer of development for a young player like him. I'm really happy that he is on that team and surrounded by that kind of talent. And McCulley, it's interesting to see that even over summer that I feel like he's just really stepped into that role of being more of the Brandon Robinson that we're used to, more that bruiser offensive player who can still score at times, but he's really just not putting up the points that we kind of, I don't want to say that he doesn't have it in him, but we kind of expected him. We saw it in glimpses last season for the Bandits when he needed to step up. He had a few really solid games where he looked really, really good as a kind of flashy offensive player, but you see it now. And I mean, 7 goals and 10 points in 5 games is perfectly fine. That's not a terrible stat line by any means for a forward, but I think he's just really settling into that bruiser who can also score, which I am perfectly fine with because he did a really, really good job of it last year.
So we'll move over to the MSL, Major Series Lacrosse. The playoffs are currently going right now. Phil, I guess there's 3 players in this one, and 2 of them are in the finals. I guess there's 3 players in the final. I don't know what I'm talking about here. I'll just carry it. Dalton Sulver plays for the Six Nations Chiefs. He's played in 3 games, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points. And then Adam Bomberry, he played in 1 regular season game. He also played in 1 playoff game, had 2 PIMs. But Phil, the Six Nations Chiefs are coached by Johnny T. They finished the regular season 16-3.
Can't wait for this list.
Yeah, they're currently in the finals, and it shouldn't shock you. Here is who Dalton Sulver and Adam Bomberry had to compete with for time: Lyle Thompson, Austin Stotts, Randy Stotts, Cody Jamieson, Shane Jackson, Brendan Bomberry, Larson Sundown, Brian Cole, Eric Fennell, Ben McIntosh, Tyson Bell, Brad Cree, Tim Edwards, Jeremy Thompson, Kellen LeClaire, Jerry Stotts, so all 3 Stotts, Marshall Paulus, Ryan Lynchberry, Kyle Rubish, Doug Jamieson, and Warren Hill. That is the team that JT has put together. Those names are unbelievable. It's unbelievable they lost 3 games. Bryce Sweeting, he plays for the Peterborough Lakers. They finished 15-4. They're also in the finals. They get the pleasure of going against the Chiefs. He played in 3 regular season games, 16 PIMs, and then 2 playoff games so far, 11 PIMs. This is the Lakers team, Phil. They're not bad themselves. Holden Catoni, Turner Evans, Josh Courier, Thomas Hogarth, Tate Catoni, Eli McLaughlin, Matt Gilray, Robert Hope, Jordan Storos, Kyle Matisse, Jake Withers, Chad Tutton, Alex Pace, and Landon Kells. And then the final one here who did not make the finals, I guess lucky for you, Carter McKenzie, Brooklyn LLC. They finished 8-7 or 8-11. He played in 8 regular season games, 1, 2, and 3. He played in 4 playoff games, 1 goal, 2 PIMs. And then they got Connor Kiernan, Kyle Waters, Tanner Cook, and Nick DeMood. Way to go, guys.
Peterborough pretty much sounds like Rochester.
Yeah.
It's
pretty
much just Rochester's team.
Add in like a Withers and a Matisse.
McLaughlin and I mean there's a few others for sure, but they got a lot of Rochester on that team, which is good for that team. I mean, it's very similar to the Chaos being, the Buffalo Chaos, as we like to call them, because it's all Buffalo bands. So it's good for the young Rochester guys to continue playing together. I know there are some trades that, not all of them are Rochester anymore, but yeah, that Six Nations Chiefs team, just a smidge stacked. And why Johnny T wasn't able to talk Kyle Rubish into coming over to the Bandits while he's coaching him, I don't know. That's really the downfall of the summer.
Assistant coach, not head coach material.
Right.
But we'll move over to the BC Junior A lacrosse. Sam LaRue plays for the Burnaby Lakers. They in 21 games they went 9-12, but he played in 10 of them. He had 16 goals, 19 assists, 35 points. Pretty good season. And then I'll tie in the Ontario Junior Lacrosse team for the Dylan Robinson led. I think he came in the first team in the whole league. I believe. Don't quote me on that one. He plays for the Toronto Beaches. 16 games played. He went 2-6-8. Phil, 64 penalty minutes the man had. Those 2 young guns had pretty good seasons in the limited time they had for their 2 teams.
Yeah, LaRue's one that we still have not, and it doesn't sound, it stinks for LaRue, and again, he's
still super young.
Right, and so he's got plenty of time to develop and plenty of time to take over a spot. With how injured the Bandits were last year, it's always going to be great to have some young talent ready to step in and step up, but it's a bummer that for the Bandits we haven't really seen LaRue really have that opportunity yet. But you can see the talent is there. 16 goals, 19 assists, 35 points in only 10 games. He's got it in him, and we just haven't really been able to see it. And even when he's played, he hasn't really played his position. He's played some defense. He hasn't played a ton of offense. When he has played offense, it hasn't, it takes a while to really get chemistry, especially in a game type situation. So we really haven't seen what Sam LaRue can offer yet, and I don't know. Fingers crossed. I guess we won't be able to see it too much this year for the Bandits if they remain healthy. So a bit of a bummer, but good to see that he's still playing and growing. And like you mentioned, very, very young player. And Dylan Robinson, if he can just continue being what he was last year. And I think the biggest thing with him is him and Bomberry is just seeing that they're healthy. I mean, I know Bomberry only played one game in, the regular season, one playoff game, but the fact that he's playing any summer lacrosse after how he came up limping in the championship and was just injured for a lot of the playoffs, it's just a really good sign to see him and Dylan Robinson looking just healthy and playing any kind of summer lacrosse. I think it's just really good for their development and to see them just healthy and playing.
So we'll move over to college ball. We got 3 players that were drafted last year by the Buffalo Bandits have yet to sign a deal so far. Zach Belter, he's the defender that they drafted 19th overall, I believe it was, first round. St. Bonaventure, he played in 14 games, 20 loose balls, ground balls they call them, and then 14 caused turnovers. Austin Bloomberg, he's a forward that they drafted. Let me pull this up, Phil, really quick. They drafted him in the 5th round, 88 overall. He plays for St. Bonaventure, like I said, 14 games, 6 goals, 1 assist, 7 points, 8 ground balls, and 2 caused turnovers. And then Christian Watts, he's a forward with Siena. He was their 5th-round draft pick, 82nd overall last year. He played in 16 games, 34 goals, 8 assists, 42 points, and 10 ground balls. Another depth forward, and for those that listened to this podcast last year, they knew I fell in love with Nick Miller. Didn't pan out. I think Christian Watts, if he signs a new deal, could be my new Nick Miller.
And again, I mean, he's the exact example of what I was talking about earlier, a 5th-round pick,
the depth.
But playing in college and putting up 34 goals in 16 games, 42 points, that's an extremely talented forward, and you snagged him in the 5th round, and hopefully the Bandits are able to secure him. And like you said, it's, again, we'll talk about it a little bit as it gets closer to the draft because it's just a full-on discussion, but it's just very interesting to see across the NLL what kind of happens with these draft picks, and especially with the Bandits having a championship caliber roster that they've proven that they can get to a championship 3 years in a row, finally won one, and is bringing most of it back again to just run it back, because why wouldn't you? So, what do you kind of do with these players? And even if you're these players, how do you feel looking at that roster? Where do you kind of fit in? So we'll get into all that a little bit later, but very just interesting conversation.
Final league to talk about here, Cam Wires. He plays for the Archers. It was their 1st-round draft pick last year, who actually was 13th overall. So he was one pick in front of Dylan Robinson. He's played in 3 games, 2 caused turnovers, 3 ground balls, and he just scored a nice goal last weekend, 1 goal. Josh Byrne has played in 5 games. Like I said, he's hurt the last couple weeks. He made the All-Star game. 5 games played, 13 goals, 6 assists, 19 points, 6 ground balls, 2 caused turnovers. Dane Smith, he's just been lighting it up right now. I watched the game on Saturday, I think it was, and he played really well. It might have been Friday. 6 games played, 5 goals, 17 assists, 22 points, 2 ground balls. Ian McKay, 7 games played, 6 goals. 1 of them was a 2-pointer, 3 assists, 10 points, 6 ground balls, and 1 caused turnovers. Chris Cloutier finally back in the lineup, 4 games, 8 goals, 1 assist, 9 points, and 2 ground balls. Chase Frazier has not been able to crack the lineup so far. 2 games played in the season so far, 3 goals, 3 points, 1 caused turnover, 4 ground balls, and Max Adler just 1 game played, 7 ground balls, 11 for 24 in the faceoff dot. This 32-second shot clock off the faceoff in the PLL, it has made Fogos just almost non-existent. A lot of these teams aren't even dressing a faceoff guy and just choosing to lose the faceoff because they're trying to get rid of that. It's kind of like, for me in the PLL right now, the faceoff is kind of like kickoffs in the NFL.
So for those who don't know what that is, explain what you're kind of bringing up there.
Usually in the PLL, I think it's a 50 or 52-second shot clock, similar to the NLL where you get a 30-second shot clock when the ball's turned over in possession and stuff like that. On the face-offs now, whoever wins the face-off, instead of having the 50 or 52-second shot clock, I'm sorry, I truly don't remember. I think it's 50. They only get 32 seconds. And for those that watch the NLL, when you're listening to this, you do listen and watch the NLL because you're listening to this for the Bandits coverage. But you might think, it's not a big deal. It's 32 seconds. It's just a massive change you lose 18 seconds on your possession in just like a snap of your finger. That's why so many teams are just going, it doesn't really matter. And I think there's stats to prove that, and people that collect this kind of data, that most teams that win the faceoffs, they're not scoring on their first possession unless you have like a guy like Trevor Baptiste, because I think he won like some crazy number of faceoffs, which isn't shocking, and they only scored on their one possession, and that's because he won it clean and went down and scored. It's just it was a dumb change that wasn't necessary in the PLL, in my opinion.
It is originally 52 seconds down to 32 with the faceoff.
Yes, 52. Yep. I don't know why I thought it was 50, but thank you.
I mean, 52 is a weird number, so it's
it is. It
fair.
Really is.
That's fair. It's as is 32, but that's all right. We don't need to get in bed. But yeah, it's interesting what they're doing. Like you said, it just, I mean, for purposes of this podcast and talking about the Bandits, it pretty much just eliminated Max Adler from playing on that team all that much for this summer. So bit of a bumper there. Good to see Wires playing over summer in general. Good to see him get at least a nice goal. Burn stinks that he's banged up, but good to see him. I mean, him and Smith seem to be doing exactly what they were doing for the NLL, where you see Burn with 13 goals, you see Smith with 17 assists. So very similar, very interesting that Dane is just really, really settling into that role as the assist guy who can also score. Obviously, we saw it a ton last season that when he was counted on to score goals, he can step up and do it, but he seems to love playing that assist man that just draws the defense to him and then passes it off to let somebody else score. He seems to really be settling into that role more and more and more as he continues to shatter his own single season records for assists. And the rest of the team, like you said, Fraser not getting in all that much, but still out there. Cloutier healthy, starting to play a little bit, and McKay looking like Ian McKay that we know he can be. Good to see his development also just continuing in this entire team. Even if they're not playing, at least they're playing together, practicing together, getting to be around each other. So even if you're not in the lineup every single game, it's good to see that they're out there doing their thing and continuing to just grow that chemistry that has led them to 3 straight championships and 1 Chaos title.
Yes. Yep. A couple years ago.
Thought so.
The only thing left I got to say is just stay healthy, please. Yeah. Please,
Josh,
for the love of
you're
God,
done.
Stay healthy.
You're done for the summer. I'm sick of this.
Hang out. I know they're Chaos of like the best record they've had in the regular season in a long time, and they're only 4-4, but just stay healthy, guys. Just stay healthy. Okay. So, Phil, is there anything else to this episode you would like to add before we shut it down and prepare not just for the Bills preseason game on Saturday, but more importantly, our 2 drafts that we got to focus up on?
Yeah, can't wait for our Fantasy Blitz when we have actual lineups to look at, and we can probably just judge ourselves and our teams and see if we actually listen to any of our own advice, which I'm sure once we're in the pressure of the draft, we'll all go out the window and I will be reaching for some ridiculous player in the middle of nowhere and look at my lineup later after it's all done and settled and be like, what the heck was that pick?
Next Fantasy Blitz is just reviewing all of our mistakes that we made.
We'll give ourselves a report card, and it probably won't be good.
There you go. It's pretty much what my previous high school and college and middle school and all my other report cards, they were never very good. Sure. But on our next episode, we'll go over another Fantasy Blitz. It'll be a nice surprise for what we decide to do. We'll go over some more, NLL action and NLL news and all that kind of fun stuff. Now that it's kind of getting into the more quiet period before the draft rolls around, we got some more ideas that we're going to throw out there. And then we'll go over the Bills preseason game versus the Pittsburgh Steelers that is taking place Saturday at 6:30 on the road. So we'll be interested to see if any of the starters play. But all I can say is Bandits players playing in the summer, Bills players, just everybody stay healthy. There's more important games coming up, and we want you out on the fields and to play into the best ability you can so you can bring more championships here to Buffalo. So thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. Follow along with us on Facebook and Instagram and Threads at Buffalo Sports Collective and on Twitter at Buffalo Sports Co. Visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you leave us that review on Apple and Spotify. Until next time, bye-bye.